Welcome to Mana TV viewers. The topic for discussion today is pleiotropy. Now this is an interesting genetic phenomenon. Now what is this pleiotropy? Usually a single gene determines the expression of a single character, but this is not always true. There are certain exceptions. What are they? Now, when a single gene influences the expression of two or more unrelated phenotypic traits, it is said to be pleiotropic. That means a pleiotropic gene is a gene with multiple phenotypic effects. Now, the phenomenon of multiple effects of a single gene is called pleiotropy. A mutation in a pleiotropic gene may have an effect on several traits simultaneously. అంటే ఒక జీన్లో వచ్చేటటువంటి ఉత్పరివర్తనము ఒకే దఫా అనేక లక్షణాలను ప్రభావితం చేస్తుంది. The mechanism involves the activation of the same gene in different tissues simultaneously, producing seemingly unrelated phenotypic effects. అంటే దగ్గర సంబంధం లేనటువంటి కొన్ని దృశ్యరూప లక్షణాలను ఒక జన్యువులో వచ్చేటటువంటి ఉత్పరివర్తనము ఆ జన్యువు అనేక కణజాలాల్లో ఒకేసారి చైతన్యం పొందడం వలన ఈ మార్పులు వస్తాయి అని. Now, molecular gene pleiotropy occurs when the gene product interacts with several proteins or catalyzes multiple enzymes. We all know a gene expresses itself in the production and action of an enzyme. Therefore, here a molecular gene pleiotropy occurs when the gene product, that is the enzyme, interacts with several proteins or catalyzes the multiple enzymes. In pea plant, the color of flower, seed coat, leaf axil are all controlled by a pleiotropic gene. P అంటే మనం బఠానీ మొక్క అనుకుంటాం. బఠానీ మొక్కలో పుష్పం రంగు, గింజ యొక్క తొక్క రంగు, గ్రీవము రంగు, ఈ మొత్తం యాక్సిల్ కలర్ అన్నీ ఒకే జీన్ ప్రభావితం చేస్తుంది. In pea plants with white flowers, the seed coats and axils were colorless, whereas in plants with purple flowers, the seed coats were brown-gray and the axils were reddish. Now, thus, rather than influencing just one characteristic feature here, the flower color gene actually influences the three features. What are they? Color of flower, color of seed coat, and color of axil. In this way, the seemingly unrelated phenotypes can be traced back to a defect in one gene with several jobs, one gene with several functions. Now, some of the best examples of pleiotropy in humans are genetic disorders. మానవుడిలో కొన్ని ఈ ప్లియోట్రోపీకి సంబంధించినటువంటి ఉదాహరణలు. They are the genetic disorders such as phenylketonuria. It is called PKU in short. Then sickle cell disease or anemia, SCD, cystic fibrosis, CF, and Marfan syndrome. Only important things have been mentioned here, the unimportant things have been left out. Now, we take up this phenylketonuria, PKU. Now, it is interesting phenomenon. If left untreated, it accounts for the death of children. Now, phenylketonuria, PKU, is one of the well-known examples for pleiotropy in humans. మానవుడిలో విరివిగా పరిశోధనలు జరపబడినటువంటి ఒక ప్లియోట్రోపీ సంబంధిత జన్యుపరమైనటువంటి వ్యాధి. PKU is an inborn error of metabolism inherited by certain children from their parents. ఇన్బోర్న్ ఎర్రర్ ఆఫ్ మెటబాలిజం అంటే పుట్టుకతో వచ్చేటటువంటి జీవక్రియ లోపం వలన అనువంశికంగా తల్లిదండ్రుల నుంచి బిడ్డలకు సంక్రమించేటటువంటి ఒక విశిష్ట వ్యాధి అని చెప్పవచ్చు. It is an autosomal recessive genetic disorder, not sex chromosomal. It is an autosomal recessive genetic disorder caused by a mutation in the phenylalanine hydroxylase gene, 𝗏 అని అంటాం, PAH, PA gene, which is located on chromosome 12, అంటే on the autosome 12. If you take, say, 23 pairs of chromosomes in the human being, the first 22 are pairs of autosomes and the last 2 are allosomes or sex chromosomes. In females, they will be XX and in males XY. Thus, males are heterogametic and females are homogametic. So, here the PA gene, that is phenylalanine hydroxylase gene, encodes for the hepatic enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase. Now, this gene is very much essential for the conversion of phenylalanine into tyrosine. Now, tyrosine is a must for the synthesis of melanin pigment in our body. So, what happens here? In the absence of this enzyme, because of a mutation in PA gene, that conversion of phenylalanine into tyrosine does not occur. What happens? As such, phenylalanine accumulates and also gets converted into phenyl pyruvate or phenyl ketone and other derivatives. Now, this is the metabolic error. Metabolic error which occurs when the fetus is within the womb of the mother. Now, because of this inborn error of metabolism, we observe what are called these infantile deaths. Now, the buildup of phenylalanine and its derivatives to toxic levels in the body produces multiple phenotypic effects. Once the phenylalanine conversion into tyrosine was not there, phenylalanine and its derivatives accumulate, and the accumulation reaches the toxic level. So, then the toxic levels of phenylalanine and its derivatives, namely phenyl ketone and others, produces multiple phenotypic effects. Now, what are these things? The symptoms include mental retardation. Now, it will affect the brain. There will be mental retardation, musty smell, very bad smell it gives. Then lighter skin, very pale colored skin, less hair, less than the normal hair coating, cardiac problems, a small head, and low birth weight. బిడ్డ అండర్ వెయిట్తో కూడా పుడుతుంది, ఉండవలసినటువంటి 4 to 6 lbs వెయిట్ ఉండదు. Now, PKU affects 1 in every 10,000 newborn in USA. అంటే పుట్టేటటువంటి ప్రతి 10,000 పసిపిల్లల్లో ఒకళ్ళు దీని ప్రభావానికి గురవుతున్నట్టుగా ఒక మెడికల్ సర్వే యునైటెడ్ స్టేట్స్ ఆఫ్ అమెరికాలో గుర్తించడం జరిగింది. Now, how to avoid this? Special diet with low or no phenylalanine should be given to the children to prevent major brain damage. Now, there they perform what is called this screening, infantile screening. In that screening, whether the child has any excess phenylalanine in it or not. If the phenylalanine is found to be excess, then the baby will be given a specialized diet which is with little or no phenylalanine. In the course of breastfeeding also, the mother is put on a diet which is free from phenylalanine. So if these precautions are taken, the aggravation of the disease can be prevented. The disease can be controlled at the primary or initial stage. So this phenylketonuria, which is in short PKU, is one of the best examples for the phenomenon of pleiotropy. Now the other interesting example about pleiotropy is sickle cell anemia, that is sickle cell disease, which is seen mostly in the African Americans, rarely in the rest of the world population. SCD is also an autosomal recessive gene disorder. ఆటోజోమ్లో ఉండేటటువంటి అంతర్గత జన్యువు లోపం పరంగా వచ్చేటటువంటి అవలక్షణం. SCD is characterized by abnormal rigid sickle or crescent-shaped RBCs under hypoxial conditions. అంటే ఈ తక్కువ ఆక్సిజన్ ఉన్నటువంటి పరిశ్రమలో ఈ వ్యక్తులు ఉన్నప్పుడు వాళ్ళల్లో ఉండేటటువంటి ఆర్బీసీ దృఢపడి కొడవలి ఆకారము లేదా క్రెసెంట్ అర్ధచంద్రాకృతి పొందుతాయి. సో దిస్ అబ్నార్మల్ షేప్ ఆఫ్ ఆర్బీసీ, that is the sickle are crescent shaped, and their rigid nature makes the RBC to clump and also stuck up together. Thereby they block the flow of blood. Now people with SCD are born with two sickle cell genes inherited one from each parent. Now a single sickle cell gene is harmless, but when it is present in homozygous condition, that person will suffer from sickle cell anemia. So about 1 in every 12 African Americans has this sickle cell disease. About 1 in every 12 African Americans has sickle cell disease trait or sickle cell anemia trait. Now the sickle-shaped RBCs clump and stuck up in small blood vessels, arterioles, capillaries and small arteries to retard or block the blood flow. రక్త ప్రసరణ వేగాన్ని తగ్గిస్తాయి లేదా రక్త ప్రసరణానికి అడ్డుకోవటం జరుగుతుంది అని. నౌ మల్టిపుల్ సిమ్టమ్స్ ఆఫ్ ఎస్సిడి సికిల్ సెల్ డిసీజ్కి అనేక లక్షణాలు ఉన్నాయి. అందుకే దీన్ని ప్లియోట్రోపిక్ ఇన్హెరిటెన్స్ అని అన్నాం. అవి ఏమిటి? జనరల్ ఫిజికల్ వీక్నెస్, నీరసం, పెయిన్స్ ఇన్ ద బాడీ, శరీరంలో నొప్పులు, టర్డ్నెస్, అలసట, డిజ్జీనెస్, మగతగా ఉండడం, షార్ట్నెస్ ఆఫ్ బ్రెత్, ఎప్పుడైతే ఆక్సిజన్ రవాణాకి అంతరాయం కలిగిందో, ఆరోగ్యకరంగా ఉండే ఆర్బీసీ హీమోగ్లోబిన్ శాతంలో తగ్గుదల వచ్చిందో అప్పుడు ఈ బ్రీతింగ్ డిఫికల్టీ అవుతుంది. సో షార్ట్నెస్ ఆఫ్ బ్రెత్, హెడేక్, దెర్ విల్ బి సివియర్ హెడేక్ అండ్ డ్యామేజ్ ఆఫ్ ఇంటర్నల్ ఆర్గాన్స్ అండ్ ఈవెన్ పెరాలిసిస్, ఫైనల్గా పక్షవాతం కూడా వచ్చి మరణించే పరిస్థితి ఏర్పడుతుంది అని. ద డిసీజ్ ఈజ్ కంట్రోల్డ్ బై ఎ పెయిర్ ఆఫ్ alleles HbA, HbS located on chromosome 11. క్రోమోజోమ్ 11 మీద ఇంతకుముందు మనం క్రోమోజోమ్ 12 గురించి చెప్పుకున్నాం. అవి ఈ మల్టిపుల్ ఎలీల్స్లో సంబంధంగా. సో నౌ ద డిసీజ్ ఈజ్ కంట్రోల్డ్ బై ఎ పెయిర్ ఆఫ్ alleles HbA, HbS. HbA means normal hemoglobin gene. HbS means sickle cell hemoglobin gene. Homozygous individuals with the genotype that is HbS expresses the phenotype SCD. Now, heterozygous individuals with the genotype HbA, HbS. Ante ikkada both genes are there, the dominant as well as the recessive. So, such people heterozygous for sickle cell gene appear unaffected, but they are still carriers of the deleterious allele. What is the deleterious allele? Harmful allele? HbS. Now, these people who are heterozygotes, though they do not express the sickle cell disease, they remain as carriers of sickle cell disease in the population. So, that way there is 50% chance of transmission of the mutant gene to the next pregnancy. The defect is carried by the substitution of glutamic acid, abbreviation then codon, the abbreviation is GLU, by valine VAL at the 6th position of the beta chain of the hemoglobin molecule. This is due to single base substitution at the 6th codon of the beta globin gene from GAG to GUG. Now, here hemoglobin is a conjugated protein which is made up of heme iron porphyrin, 2 alpha polypeptide chains and 2 beta polypeptide chains. So, in each beta polypeptide chain, in the 6th place, there is this glutamic acid. Its codon is GAG. Now, because of the gene mutation in the single base of a codon, GAG is converted into GUG, and thus that glutamic acid is replaced by valine in sickle cell hemoglobin. So, the mutant hemoglobin molecule undergoes polymerization under low oxygen tension. It causes the change in the shape of RBC from the biconcave disc to elongated sickle-shaped RBC. Now, this sickle-shaped RBC, they clump together and undergo agglutination and hemolysis. It is also an example of pleiotropism, that is, sickle cell disease is also an example of pleiotropism next to phenylketonuria. Now, you have a plate or illustration here wherein you can see the normal RBC, biconcave disc-like, and that sickle shape or crescent shaped RBC. Now, there is this normal hemoglobin and also this sickle cell hemoglobin. In the normal hemoglobin, the mRNA codon here is CAG, and it codes for 6th place glutamic acid, GLU. But what happens? GAG has become GUG. That means central adenine is replaced by uracil in the mRNA. So, this GUG codes for valine instead of what is called this glutamic acid. So, this single base replacement resulted in the formation of this abnormal what are called these rigid sickle shaped RBC, which will clump together and block the flow of blood in the narrow blood vessels, thereby retarding the flow or stopping the blood flow, leading to fatal condition. Next listed here is cystic fibrosis. In brief, it is called CF. Now, cystic fibrosis is another example for what is called this pleiotropic type of inheritance. Now, CF is also an autosomal recessive genetic disorder. It is caused due to mutations in a gene on the long arm of chromosome 7. You have two arms, short arm, long arm. So, long arm of chromosome 7. Now, this gene influences salt and water movement across the epithelial cell membrane. Now, salt and water movement are influenced by movement of water, and salt is influenced by this particular gene across the epithelial cell membrane. Now, what it does exactly? The genetic defect causes increased sodium and chloride content in our sweat. It also causes an increase in the resorption of sodium and water from respiratory epithelium. ఈ రెస్పిరేటరీ ఎపిథీలియం నుంచి సోడియం నీరు పునఃశోషణాన్ని, అలాగే ఇక్కడ ఈ స్వెట్లో సోడియము క్లోరైడ్ కంటెంట్ని అధికం చేయడము ఈ జీన్ డిఫెక్టు, దట్ ఈజ్ సిస్టిక్ ఫైబ్రోసిస్ SF ప్రభావితం చేస్తుంది అని. ది ఎక్స్ట్రాసెల్యులార్ chloride causes the mucus coat over the cells to become more sticky and viscous. అంటే కణాలపైన ఉన్నటువంటి ఆ జిగట పొర మందపారి జిగటగా విస్కస్గా తయారవడాన్నిగా మారుస్తుంది. Thus the mucus clog builds up in organs such as lungs, ఊపిరితిత్తులు, ప్యాంక్రియాస్, క్లోమము, GI tract అంటే గ్యాస్ట్రోఇంటెస్టైనల్ ట్రాక్, ఆహారనాళం, etc. There would be further complications and may lead to death at the age of 5. So, this is another interesting pleiotropic type of inheritance which is called cystic fibrosis. Mainly, it influences the what is called transport or movement of sodium and chloride ions across the epithelial cell membrane, and it makes the mucus sticky and viscous, which forms a covering of the cells. So, this mucus build up in organs such as lungs and pancreas, gastrointestinal tract, causes irreparable damage, and it may lead to death at a very early age. Now, this is another interesting genetic inheritance, which is called polygenic inheritance. It is just opposite to that of the pleiotropy. You learnt in pleiotropy, a single gene determines the expression of two or more characters. But here, a character is determined by the cumulative or additive effect of several genes. Therefore, polygenic inheritance occurs when one characteristic is controlled by two or more genes. Often the genes are large in quantity. They may be large in number, but small in effect. Because if you take each gene, it can only add to the additive effect that is already there. Examples of human polygenic inheritance are our weight, our height, our skin color, eye color, and intelligence. ఇవన్నీ కూడా మనకి ఈ పాలిజీనిక్ ట్రేట్స్ అని అంటాం. ప్రతి దాని యొక్క వ్యక్తీకరణ అనేది అనేక జీన్స్ సంచయిత సమిష్టి ప్రభావం మీద ఆధారపడి ఉంటుంది. పాలిజీన్స్ ఎగ్జిస్ట్ ఇన్ అదర్ ఆర్గానిజమ్స్ యాజ్ వెల్. దే ఆర్ దేర్ ఇన్ డ్రోసోఫిలా. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, ఇన్ డ్రోసోఫిలా there is polygyny with traits such as wing morphology, రెక్కల దృశ్య రూపాలు, bristles, రోమాలు, and many others. Now, other than this, in plants, kernel color in wheat, గోధుమ గింజ తొక్క రంగు అండి. కార్బ్ లెంగ్త్ ఇన్ మెయిజ్, మొక్కజొన్న కండె పొడవు అండి. ప్రోటీన్ కంటెంట్ ఇన్ కార్న్, మొక్కజొన్నలో ఉండేటటువంటి ప్రోటీన్ శాతం. దెన్ కోట్ కలర్ ఇన్ క్యాటిల్, మన పశువుల్లో ఉండేటటువంటి చర్మపు వర్ణము. ఈ మొదలైనటువంటి ఈ లక్షణాలు, వీటన్నిటినీ కూడా మనం క్వాంటిటేటివ్ ట్రైట్స్, మెరిస్టిక్ ట్రైట్స్, మనం ఈ మెజరబుల్ ట్రైట్స్ అని అంటూ ఉంటాం. నౌ పాలిజెనిక్ క్యారెక్టర్స్ షో ఏ కంటిన్యూస్ గ్రడేషన్ ఫ్రమ్ వన్ ఎక్స్ట్రీమ్ టు ది అదర్. అంటే ఈ లక్షణాలు మెయిన్గా మనం చెప్పాలంటే దృశ్య రూపాల్లో రెండు ఎక్స్ట్రీమ్స్కి మధ్య వివిధ దశల్లో మనకు తారసపడుతూ ఉంటాయి. ఉదాహరణకి మానవ జనాభా శరీర వర్ణం తీసుకుంటే మనకి యూరోపియన్స్ శ్వేత జాతీయులు అన్నాం. వారి శరీరంలో మెలనిన్ వర్ణకం అసలు లేకపోవటం మూలాన తెల్లగా ఉంటారు వాళ్ళు. అదే మనం ఆఫ్రికన్ అమెరికన్స్ తీసుకుంటే వారు దీనికి ఆపోజిట్, నల్లగా ఉంటారు. ఈ మధ్యలో అనేక గ్రడేషన్స్ మనకి, ఈ కాంప్లెక్షన్స్ ఉన్నాయి మనకి, ఈ రంగులు. అవి ముఖ్యంగా మన ఇండియన్స్లో నార్త్ ఇండియా నుంచి మనం సౌత్ ఇండియాకు వస్తున్న కొంది ఆ డిగ్రీ ఆఫ్ ఫెయిర్నెస్ తగ్గుతూ ఉంటుంది. సౌత్ ఇండియా నుంచి నార్త్ ఇండియా వెళుతున్న కొద్దీ డిగ్రీ ఆఫ్ ఫెయిర్నెస్ పెరుగుతూ ఉంటుంది. దీనికి ఎన్విరాన్మెంటల్ కండిషన్స్ కూడా కొంత కారణం ఉంటుంది. ఎన్విరాన్మెంటల్ కండిషన్స్ ఆల్సో ప్లే ఏ రోల్ ఇన్ ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్సింగ్ ది క్వాంటిటేటివ్ ట్రైట్స్. నౌ most metric and meristic, which are called quantitative traits, are controlled by a number of genetic loci, that means a number of genes. This quantitative variation indicates polygenic inheritance. It is an additive or cumulative effect of two or more genes on a single phenotypic character. అంటే మన చర్మం రంగుని ఎన్నో జీన్స్ ప్రభావితం చేస్తూ ఉంటాయి. ఆ డామినెంట్ జీన్స్ నంబర్ను బట్టి, ఆ వ్యక్తిలో ఉండేటటువంటి చర్మాన్ని ప్రభావం చేసేటటువంటి డామినెంట్ జీన్స్ సంఖ్యను బట్టి అతనిలో ఆ యొక్క రంగు తీవ్రత అనేది కనిపిస్తూ ఉంటుంది. అవి ఎక్కువగా ఉంటే నలుపు ఎక్కువగా ఉంటుంది, అవి తక్కువ సంఖ్యలో ఉన్న కొద్దీ నలుపు తగ్గి తెలుపుదనం పెరుగుతూ ఉంటుంది అని. It is the converse of pleiotropic inheritance, where a single gene influences two or more phenotypic traits. ఇందాక చెప్పాను మీకు, ఇది దానికి విరుద్ధం. అంటే పాలీజీన్స్లో అనేక జీన్స్ ఒక లక్షణం యొక్క బహిర్గతను ప్రభావితం చేస్తే, ఇక్కడ ఒక జీన్ రెండు అంతకంటే ఎక్కువ లక్షణాల బహిర్గతను ప్రభావితం చేస్తుంది అని అర్థం ఇక్కడ. Now, human skin color inheritance, let us see. Human skin color shows continuous gradation between the two extremes. What are those two extremes? ఇందాక చెప్పాను మనం. One extreme Africans or African Americans. The other extreme ఏంటి? Whites. అంటే అమెరికన్ పాపులేషన్ తీసుకుంటే వీళ్ళిద్దరూ మేజర్, if you leave other immigrants. So, African Americans and white Americans. Hence, it is a quantitative character. అంటే gradation, it shows gradation, continuous gradation కనిపిస్తూ ఉంటుంది. Now, human skin pigmentation is controlled by at least 3 independently inherited genes. అంటే మన స్కిన్ కలర్ యొక్క అనువంశికతను ప్రభావితం చేసి స్వతంత్రంగా అనువంశికత చెందేటటువంటి 3 జతల జన్యువులు ఉన్నాయి. ద 3 జీన్స్ A, B and C, దీస్ ఆర్ క్యాపిటల్స్లో మనం రాసాం. అంటే డామినెంట్ అని, వాటి యొక్క రెసివ్స్ స్మాల్ a, స్మాల్ b, స్మాల్ c. సో కంట్రోల్ స్కిన్ కలర్. Now the dominant alleles are responsible for dark skin color and their recessive alleles A, B and C for light skin color or pale or white skin color. Now, an individual who is homozygous with the phenotype అంటే సమయుగ్మజంగా ఉన్నాడు ఒక ఆయనలో ఏ అంటే క్యాపిటల్ ఏ, క్యాపిటల్ బి, క్యాపిటల్ సి, అంటే 3 pairs ఆఫ్ డామినెంట్ అండ్ రెసెసివ్ ఎలీల్స్. హోమోజైగస్ కండిషన్లో ఉన్నాయి 3 pairs ఆఫ్ డామినెంట్ ఎలీల్స్, రెసెసివ్ ఉండవు ఇక్కడ. వుడ్ బి ఎక్స్ట్రీమ్లీ డార్క్ వైల్ అన్ ఇండివిజువల్ విత్ రెసెసివ్స్ small a, small b, small c, అంటే homozygous for the 3 pairs of recessive alleles. Genotype, this genotype అంటే small a, small b, small c, genotype would be white or fair in complexion. దేహ శరీర ఛాయలో శ్వేతవర్ణం కానీ బాగా ఇది కానీ ఉండటం జరుగుతుంది. Now you can look at this say illustration wherein 64 zygotic combinations are shown here, because each parent produces 8 types of gametes, 8 into 8. It comes to say 64. That is, both are heterozygotes, the male as well as female. If such a cross occurs, there will be a probability for 64 zygotic combinations. Now here, individuals among the 64 with no single dominant allele, ఒక్క క్యాపిటల్ ఏ కానీ బి కానీ సి కానీ లేదు, 6 రెసెసివ్సే ఉన్నటువంటిది ఒక వ్యక్తి ఉంటాడు ఒక ఎక్స్ట్రీమ్లో. అదర్ ఎక్స్ట్రీమ్ చూస్తే 6 డామినెంట్సే ఉండి బ్లాక్, ప్యూర్ బ్లాక్, హోమోజైగస్ బ్లాక్ 1/64 ఉంటుంది. తర్వాత నీకు ఇక్కడ ఒకటే డామినెంట్ ఎలీల్ ఉన్నటువంటిది అవి వచ్చి 1:6 individuals will have this only one dominant allele. Then with 2 dominant alleles, polygenic inheritance illustrated by the inheritance of human skin color, we have a marriage between 2 heterozygous individuals. Each one has 3 dominant alleles, capital A, capital B, capital C, and recessive alleles also small a, small b, small c. So each parent produces 8 kinds of gametes. So 8 into 8, 64 zygotic combinations are there. And let us see among these 64 zygotic combinations, what is the ratio of individuals with number of these dominant alleles. With no dominant allele, you have 1 అంటే 64కి 1. With 6 dominant alleles, you have another 1/64. Then with 1 dominant allele, you have 6 individuals. Then you have with say 5 dominant alleles also, you have 6 individuals. Then with 3 dominant, 2 dominant alleles, you have 15 individuals. And with 3 dominant alleles, you have 20 individuals. And again with 4 dominant alleles, you have say 15 individuals. So the ratio of 64 is like this: 1:6:15:20:15:15:6:1. ఇటు ఉన్నటువంటి 1లు 2 కూడా ఈ వైట్ ఏమో హోమోజైగస్ రెసెసివ్, ఇటు వచ్చేసి మనకి ఈ బ్లాక్ ఏమో హోమోజైగస్ డామినెంట్. వీళ్ళిద్దరూ కూడా ప్యూర్ బ్లాక్ అండ్ ప్యూర్ వైట్ ఇండివిజువల్స్ ఒక్కొక్కళ్ళే ఉంటారు మనకి దీంట్లో. నౌ ది లాస్ట్ స్టెప్ హియర్ ఈజ్ సెక్స్ లింక్డ్ రెసెసివ్ inheritance. You know, X and Y genes are allosomes. X and Y chromosomes are allosomes or sex chromosomes. Now, male has only one X, female has double X. So, female is homozygous for the two X chromosomes. Male is hemizygous because male has only one X chromosome. Now, these X chromosomes carry certain recessive genes. Now, in the presence of a dominant allele on the other X chromosome, the recessive alleles usually in heterozygous condition do not express themselves in females. But in the absence of a dominant allele on the Y chromosome, the recessive allele which is present single on the single X chromosome finds its expression in males. That is why sex-linked disorders, that is X-linked disorders, are more common in men than in women. Now, the most common X-linked recessive disorders in man are red-green color blindness and hemophilia. Red-green color blindness, retina of humans contain cells sensitive to red and green colors, that is protanopia and deuteranopia. When a woman with normal vision marries a colorblind man, all their children are normal, but daughters are carriers. As long as a woman has no allele, as long as she is not a carrier, as long as she is a 100% normal person, that is as far as her vision is concerned, whatever the phenotype of the husband may be, no child of this couple becomes colorblind. That means colorblind children percentage is nil when the mother is normal and even if the father is colorblind. But here the daughters become carriers, but no son or daughter is colorblind. If a carrier woman marries a man with normal vision, what would be the phenotypes of their would-be children? Now here, all daughters and half the sons have normal vision, and the other half of the sons are colorblind అన్నాం. అంటే కొడుకుల్లో 50%. మొత్తం సంతతిలో తీసుకుంటే మనకి ఈ 25% వస్తుంది. సన్స్లో తీసుకుంటే 50% వస్తుంది. బట్ డాటర్స్ నౌ ఆర్ నాట్ కలర్ బ్లైండ్. So, in these two marriages, the marriage between a normal woman and a colorblind man, the marriage between a carrier woman and a normal man do not result in the production of colorblind children. Now, let us look at the third case of a marriage. Now, this time a colorblind woman we take and a man with normal vision. Now, mother contributes her X chromosome because she is colorblind, she is having the recessive allele on each of her X chromosome. So, she transmits the allele for colorblindness through her X chromosome to all daughters as well as sons. But each daughter receives the X chromosome from the father, which is having the dominant allele because he is not colorblind. So, what happens in this marriage? When the mother is colorblind and the father is normal, all their daughters are carriers. They have color-blind allele, recessive allele on one X chromosome. Another X chromosome received from the father, dominant. But sons have received the X chromosome from the mother with the recessive color-blind allele. Y chromosome, he has no allele to suppress its expression. Therefore, sons become color-blind. All sons, 100% sons become color-blind, and only here color-blind daughters nil. They are carriers. When you would like to get color-blind daughters means at least mother must be a carrier and father must obviously be color-blind. So, the marriage between a carrier woman and a color-blind man leads to the production of 50% of the progeny color-blind daughters as well as sons, because mother is a carrier, father is color-blind. So, color-blind daughters are likely to be born to which of the following couple? A. Carrier normal woman, color-blind man, nil. Carrier woman, normal visioned man, no chance. Color-blind woman and what is called this normal visioned person, no chance. Carrier woman and color-blind man, or both color-blind, of course, irrespective of the sex, every child is born with color-blindness. Now, some time ago, color-blind people, though they scored the top rank in entrance exams in Andhra Pradesh, they were denied admission because into surgery. Because of his color blindness, he may not distinguish the arteries from nerves and other visceral organs. Thus, there is every probability of cutting a wrong, structure. That is why people were denied. But later on, government gave exemption to them. Taking an undertaking now is a must. In that undertaking, the person identified as colorblind, red-green colorblind, should declare that he will not opt for any PG course related to this surgery, and he will not perform any surgeries when he establishes his own practice. So, that way, that problem of denying admission for colorblind people was not there, was no longer there at present. Now, the most common X-linked recessive disorders in man are red-green color blindness and also hemophilia. Now, this red-green color blindness, because of this in the retina of humans, we have rods and cones. You know, cones are sensitive to bright and colored vision. So, that way they are sensitive to red and green colors. So, based on that, this red-green color blindness is recognized. Now, hemophilia. Now, what is this hemophilia? Hemophilia is also another type of X-linked recessive genetic disorder seen in human beings. Now, it also follows the same pattern of inheritance that is seen in the case of color blindness. Now, both these disorders follow what is called this crisscross pattern of inheritance. Both these disorders follow crisscross pattern of inheritance. What is meant by crisscross pattern of inheritance? Zigzag అని అంటాం. Supposing the trait is there in the P1 generation, that is grandfather generation with the grandfather. Now, he passes on this character to his daughter, and daughter passes on the trait to her son. So, if you take the grandson into consideration, the grandson receives this trait from his maternal grandfather through his mother. Therefore, this trait, that is the hemophilia or red-green color blindness, alternates with sex as it passes from one generation to the next generation. Now, in the P generation, say for example, it is with say male. In F1 generation, it is with female. In F2 generation, it is with male. So, this kind of crisscross inheritance is characteristic of these X-linked recessive traits. This point you are to bear in mind. Now, hemophilia A is a recessive X-linked disease like red-green color blindness. It is due to absence of functional clotting factor 8. Now, this is called anti-hemophilic globulin. When this is absent, the blood in that particular person does not clot, or the process of clotting gets unduly delayed, and he will have continuous profuse bleeding, and he bleeds unto death. So, 80% of hemophilia cases are of hemophilia A. Hemophilia A is due to deficiency of which clotting factor, Nana? It is due to the deficiency of factor 8. There are 13 clotting factors that have been identified, but in that 13 list, 6th factor is yet to be determined. So, 8th factor is anti-hemophilic globulin. So, this is hemophilia A. It accounts for 80%. It follows the same pattern of inheritance like this red-green color blindness, because both are X-linked recessive characteristics. Hemophilia B is due to the absence of functional clotting factor. Hemophilia B is due to the absence of functional clotting factor 9. This 9th factor is also called Xmas or Christmas factor. If a hemophilic person is injured, if at all a person having hemophilia is injured, bleeding is prolonged due to delay in clotting. So, there is profuse bleeding, total loss of blood, and the person ultimately succumbs. So, this hemophilia is therefore a dangerous disease. People having hemophilia must be very careful whenever they are driving two-wheelers or four-wheelers, because the probability of meeting with an accident is more than the people who walk or move on their own from place to place. So, these are the two important, what are called these sex-linked diseases studied in man. Now, besides these things, though the X chromosome is not, say, genetically as important, the Y chromosome in male is not genetically as important as the X chromosome, but Y chromosome, say, linked diseases are there in human beings. One such thing is what is called this Y-linked disease. Y-linked disease is, Y-linked trait we say, is hypertrichosis, and the other Y-linked one is porcupine men. Now, what is this hypertrichosis? here this trait is transmitted, all Y-linked traits are transmitted directly from father to son. It doesn't follow crisscross inheritance. And this trait is not found in daughter. When it is there in the father, it goes without saying, the sons also express this character. You might have seen people with hair in the pinne, ఈ చెవి దొప్పలో బాగా రోమాలు గుబురుగా ఉంటాయి. అది తండ్రిలో ఉంటే ఆ లక్షణం కొడుకులో కూడా వస్తుంది. దట్ ఈజ్ వాట్ ఈజ్ కాల్డ్ హైపర్ట్రైకోసిస్. This is an interesting thing. Another thing is porcupine men. There will be hair, dense hair on the body, stiff hair also, just like you find that stiff spiny hair on the body of a porcupine. Now, another interesting feature that is seen mostly in men but not in women is what is called the sex-influenced trait. Now, what is this sex-influenced trait? Now, this pattern baldness is present mostly in men when compared to women. Now, this gene for baldness, 𝗳𝗏𝗪, recessive 𝗧_b, dominant 𝗧_B. Now, if an individual who is heterozygous with 𝗳B, 𝗧_B and 𝗧_b, if he is a male, he becomes bald. If that person is a female, she becomes normal nana. So, when you look at men, you find men show this character more frequently than women. That is pattern baldness. Because a man becomes bald in homozygous bald condition, homozygous bald gene, and also heterozygous. A woman becomes bald only when she is homozygous dominant bald. Heterozygous condition and also that recessive condition, she doesn't express that baldness. Why heterozygous condition finds its expression in men? It is because of the influence of the male sex hormones. So, in the presence of testosterone, a male, though he has a single gene for baldness, he expresses that character baldness. So, that way this topless heads, that is the bald heads, బట్టతలలు అంటాం, పురుషుల్లో ఎక్కువగా కనిపిస్తాయి, స్త్రీలలో తక్కువ. ఎక్కడో మనకి 1000కి ఒకళ్ళు కూడా కనపడరు. ఎందుకంటే వాళ్ళల్లో ఈ 𝗧B, 𝗧B ఉన్నప్పుడే బట్టతల వస్తుంది. మిగిలిన 2 జీనోటైప్స్ హెటరోజైగస్లో కానీ రెస్సిలో కానీ వాళ్ళలో ఆ లక్షణం బయటపడదు అని. So, this is another interesting example that we observe in human society, like Y-linked trait hypertrichosis mostly in men when compared to women. So, these are certain interesting genetic traits that have been studied, the pattern of inheritance of these traits. Some of them are Mendelian disorders, have been studied in human beings. So, this knowledge will help you to face your exam in genetics, in your what is called that ensuing Gurukula teachers test. My best wishes to every one of you. Thank you very much.